It's the year 726 AD. At its strongest, the Byzantine Empire is the heir to Rome, the protector of Christianity, and the ruler of the Mediterranean. There are holy relics, golden domes, and icons in Constantinople that are so beautiful that people say they cry, bleed, and do miracles. The faces of Christ, Mary, and the saints have looked down on the faithful for hundreds of years, making these holy pictures the heart of Byzantine religion. They were like a link between heaven and earth. But early in the summer, Emperor Leo III, a fighter, a strategist, and a survivor of Arab sieges, makes a choice that will start the biggest religious civil war in the history of the Christian world. He gives the order to destroy all of the empire's icons. The emperor who could hear voices. No, Leo III was not a religious leader. He was a fighter who got to the throne by killing people, being sneaky, and being a great soldier. Leo was born in Syria and grew up on the edges of where Islam and Christianity met. He saw the Arab Caliphate's unstoppable growth, an empire that conquered with frightening speed, driven by a faith that didn't accept any images at all. Muslims made fun of Byzantium by saying that its people worshipped idols and that their temples were empty of people because their God couldn't be shown. As Leo saw his kingdom fall apart because of constant Arab attacks, he started to wonder if God was punishing Byzantium for worshipping false gods. According to ancient sources, Leo talked to bishops, mystics, and even Jewish scholars who reminded him of the Old Testament rule, "Thou shalt not make any graven image for yourself." Over time, Leo became more and more sure that the beloved pictures of Christ and the Virgin Mary that are in every church, every home, and every soldier's shield were not windows to heaven. They spoke against God. Leo's first law was made public in 726 AD. Icons were called sacrilegious. It was against the rules to worship them. The most holy picture in Constantinople, the Christ Pantocrator icon above the chalk gate of the Imperial house, had to be taken down right away. After that, the kingdom would be covered in blood for more than 100 years. The fight that shook heaven. A crowd was already there when Imperial soldiers with hammers and ladders showed up at the choke gate. A scholar or a priest was not one of them. They were regular people, like bakers, merchants, moms, and fishermen, and they had prayed in front of that icon their whole life. They had kissed it to protect, touched it to heal, and cried in front of it in sorrow. After that, forces climbed up to destroy it. The crowd rushed forward. Women screamed. Men threw rocks. A group of people in the crowd knocked the ladder over, sending a soldier tumbling to the ground below. When the crowd got angry, they attacked the last few troops and pushed them back from the gate. It looked like the people of Constantinople had won for a short time while things were going crazy. When the excombinators showed up, who were the royal guard, they were in full force. After that, there was a massacre. When the guards came through the crowd with swords and spears, they hit protesters with clubs and chained up the leaders of the group. There was blood on the stones in front of the holy gate. People were warned by leaving bodies in the streets. By the time night came, the icon was gone, burned and broken into pieces. But the fight back had only just started. The monks who wouldn't kneel. The real war was going on in the monasteries, not in the towns where there were riots. The spiritual heart of the kingdom was its monks, who made sacred art and made sure that people respected icons. They had spent their whole lives painting the face of Christ, lighting up texts, and making mosaics that turned stone into gods. They didn't just think Leo's order was wrong, it was a war against God. All over the kingdom, monasteries refused to follow the rules. Icons were hidden by monks in walls, gardens, and on secret trips to faraway islands. When imperial officials came to take the holy images, they were met with resistance. There were monks who spat at the troops. Some people locked themselves in churches and sang songs while soldiers beat on the doors. Leo answered quickly and harshly. People broke into monasteries. Monks who didn't follow the rules were beaten, sent away, or locked up. Some people had their tongues cut out to stop them from protesting. Others had scars on their faces to show that they were heretics and should be avoided by anyone who tried to go against the emperor's orders. The monks wouldn't break. They died for their beliefs, and their pain showed them and their fans that Leo was not fighting against idolatry. He was against Christ, the hero who chose God over the emperor. Patriarch Hermanus I, who was Leo's choice to be the spiritual leader of Byzantine Christianity, was the one who fought back the hardest. He wasn't a radical, Hermanus. He was a moderate and a good diplomat who had worked hard for rulers for many years. But when Leo asked him to support iconoclasm, which means destroying images, Hermanus said no. In a dramatic showdown in front of the imperial court, the old patriarch stood up to Leo and told him that worshipping icons was not idolatry, but a custom that had been sanctified by centuries of Christian practice. He said that icons were not gods, but rather ways to connect with the holy, ways to show devotion, and ways to grow in faith. Leo didn't care. He said that Hermanus was heretical, that he was going against God's will, and that he was leading the people wrong. The father could either support iconoclasm or step down. Hermanus chose to leave. After taking off his robes, he left the palace and vanished into thin air. Patriarch Anastasios, who took his place, was a supporter who would follow all imperial orders for the next 10 years. Leo had taken down the last institutional hurdle to his religious revolution when the patriarch left. Now the emperor had no one or anything stopping him from having complete power over everything. Only the women were there. But behind the palaces and convents of Constantinople, a rebellion was growing. It was led not by bishops or generals, but by empresses, nuns, and widows who wanted to show that faith, like fire, can't be put out by order. While Leo III waged his war on icons, a quiet rebellion was growing in the one place he could not fully control: the women's quarters of the imperial palace. Byzantine empresses were not powerless ornaments. They were educated, politically astute, and deeply connected to the spiritual life of the empire. Many had been raised in convents, tutored by monks, steeped in icon veneration since childhood. And when Leo began smashing the sacred images, these women did not simply obey. They resisted. They plotted. They waited. The most dangerous among them was Empress Irene, a woman who would one day rule the empire alone and become the first female emperor in Byzantine history. But in 726 AD, Irene was just a girl, born on the Greek island of Athens, raised in a world where icons were as essential as breath. She would remember what Leo had done, and when her time came, she would make him pay. The Emperor Who Doubled Down. Leo III died in 741 AD, but his son, Constantine V, known to history as Constantine the Dung-Named by his enemies, inherited both the throne and his father's fanaticism. If Leo had been a pragmatic iconoclast, Constantine was a zealot. Constantine didn't just ban icons, he hunted them. He purged monasteries with military precision, arresting abbots, seizing properties, and forcing monks to marry in public ceremonies designed to humiliate them and break their vows. He convened the Council of Hieria in 754 AD, where over 300 bishops, under imperial pressure, declared icon veneration heretical. But Constantine made a fatal miscalculation. He believed he could erase centuries of devotion through force and decree. He believed the people would eventually forget the faces of their saints. He was wrong. Beneath the surface, icon veneration survived. In hidden chapels, in locked rooms, in the private chambers of noblewomen, the faithful continued to pray before forbidden images. Mothers taught their daughters to kiss icons in secret. Priests whispered blessings over hidden relics. The empire obeyed in public and worshipped in the shadows. And in those shadows, a new generation was preparing to strike back. The bride who changed everything. In 769 AD, Constantine V's son Leo IV took the throne and married a young Athenian noblewoman named Irene. She was beautiful, intelligent, and devoutly orthodox. She was also an icon venerator, a secret she kept carefully hidden from her iconoclast husband. Leo IV died suddenly in 780 AD, leaving Irene as regent for their 10-year-old son, Constantine VI. For the first time in decades, an icon venerator controlled the Byzantine throne. Irene moved slowly, carefully. She replaced iconoclast officials with moderates. She opened channels of communication with exiled monks. She whispered to bishops, promised pardons, and began laying the groundwork for the impossible, reversing iconoclasm entirely. In 787 AD, Irene convened the Second Council of Nicaea, the most important church council since the 4th century. Over 300 bishops gathered, this time not under imperial threat, but under imperial protection. The council's verdict was swift and decisive. Icon veneration was orthodox. Iconoclasm was heresy. The faces of Christ and the Virgin Mary could return to the churches. The monks could emerge from hiding. The images that had been smashed, burned, and buried could be resurrected. But Irene's triumph came with a cost. Her own son, Constantine VI, had grown to resent her power. In a brutal power struggle, Irene had him blinded and imprisoned, a grotesque act even by Byzantine standards. She ruled alone as emperor, not empress, the first woman to claim that title in her own right. Her reign would be short. In 802 AD, she was overthrown and exiled, but her legacy endured. Icons were restored. The second wave of fire. Yet iconoclasm was not finished. In 814 AD, Emperor Leo V, another military hardliner, revived the ban. Once again, icons were destroyed. Once again, monks were persecuted. The cycle of violence resumed as if Irene's victory had been nothing but a dream. This second wave of iconoclasm was even more brutal than the first. Monasteries were emptied, libraries were burned. The great iconophile monk Theodore the Studiot was flogged, imprisoned, and exiled repeatedly for refusing to submit. His letters from prison became manifestos of resistance, circulating secretly among the faithful. But this time, the women struck faster. The triumph of orthodoxy. In 842 AD, another child emperor ascended the throne, Michael III, with his mother Theodora as regent. Like Irene before her, Theodora was a secret icon venerator, and like Irene, she waited for her moment. On March 11, 843 AD, a date now celebrated as the Feast of Orthodoxy, Theodora issued her decree. Iconoclasm was condemned forever. Icon veneration was restored as official doctrine. The persecuted monks were pardoned. The exiled bishops returned in triumph. In churches across the empire, icons were unveiled once more. People wept, kissed the sacred images, and sang hymns of gratitude. Processions filled the streets of Constantinople as priests carried icons that had been hidden for decades back to their altars. The war was over. The images had won. The Archive War Verdict. Leo III believed he was saving Byzantium by destroying its idols. Instead, he ignited a century of bloodshed that nearly destroyed the faith he claimed to protect. The empresses, Irene and Theodora, succeeded where armies and councils had failed, not through force, but through patience, cunning, and the understanding that faith cannot be legislated away. The icons returned, but Byzantium never fully recovered. The empire that once commanded the Mediterranean would spend the next 600 years slowly bleeding until the Ottomans finally extinguished it in 1453. History remembers the images, but it was the fire that nearly consumed them that truly mattered.